Welcome back to Dial M for Miami, Season 1, Cracks in the Foundation, the Sergio Pino story. A true crime podcast produced by Herdat Media and hosted by me, Anna Gincosis. Episode 2, Toxic Relationships and Toxicology Reports. Each episode uncovers new layers of a chilling saga that is both deeply personal and publicly scandalous. From a towering figure in Miami's business world to the relentless efforts to control, to silence, and to ultimately attempt to destroy the woman he once called his wife. This is a story of Sergio Pino, a man whose hunger for power and control spiraled into something truly sinister. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most terrifying aspects of any toxic relationships, when manipulation and coercion evolve into outright violence. But in this case, the violence wasn't physical, at least not at first. Instead, it was a carefully orchestrated assault on a woman's health, on her mind, and her very life. And the man behind it all? Her husband, and the father of her 2 daughters. When you think of marriage, you imagine a partnership. You imagine love and mutual respect. You picture the happy moments captured in photos, the milestones celebrated together. But for Tatiana, her marriage to Sergio was anything but a fairy tale. What began as a seemingly perfect union deteriorated into a nightmarish struggle for survival. One where her own home became a war zone, and the person she once loved turned into a monster she could barely recognize. Let's rewind to 2018. Sergio and Tatiana had already been married for decades. From the outside, they appeared to be the quintessential power couple. Sergio, a successful developer with a thriving business empire, and Tatiana, the beautiful, devoted wife and mother who had been by his side throughout his rise to prominence. But beneath that veneer of success and happiness, their relationship was unraveling at the seams. Tatiana, no longer willing to live under Sergio's thumb, was ready to break free. She sought a divorce, a decision that would set off a chain reaction of fear, intimidation, and ultimately violence. Sergio, determined to keep control, wasn't about to let Tatiana go that easily. His methods, however, were anything but straightforward. They were insidious, covert, and utterly terrifying. In a desperate bid to maintain his grip on her, he began a campaign of psychological warfare. At first, it was letters and phone calls. Harmless, you might think. But they weren't. These weren't just ordinary communications. They were menacing, filled with veiled threats and an unmistakable air of intimidation. Sergio even went as far as spoofing phone calls from Colombian numbers, a subtle but clear message to Tatiana that he could reach her anywhere, anytime. He was relentless, trying to pressure her into settling their divorce on his terms. But Tatiana, she wasn't backing down. When the letters and calls failed to have the desired effect, Sergio escalated his tactics. He moved from psychological warfare to something far more invasive. He began tracking her movements. Tatiana, unaware at first, was living under constant surveillance. Sergio had placed a tracking device on her car, following her every move and keeping tabs on her whereabouts. But Tatiana was no fool. She quickly caught on and fought back in her own way. She placed a similar device on Sergio's car, and for good measure, installed a voice recorder to gather evidence of his infidelity. Her suspicions about his relationship with Nancy Pastor were soon confirmed. The woman that he claimed was merely a business associate was much more than that. She was another cog in the machinery of his deception. With his affair out in the open and his control over Tatiana slipping, Sergio's desperation grew. Tracking her movements wasn't enough anymore. He needed to break her, physically and mentally. And that's when the real horror began. By the end of 2018, Sergio had launched an insidious new attack, one that would turn Tatiana's own body against her. He began tampering her medications, lacing them with deadly substances, things like bath salts, arsenic, even cyanide, and later fentanyl. These poisons were silent killers, working their way through Tatiana's system, slowly breaking her down.
According to Tatiana Pino's sworn deposition, she began experiencing breathing issues after filing for divorce. She was intubated 6 times and was in and out of the hospital for 3 years. Ultimately, a doctor at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore determined she was experiencing side effects from fentanyl poisoning. Now, right away, when I'm thinking somebody's going to the hospital, poison doesn't jump into my mind. How would doctors make that leap to even test for potential poisoning?
Right, good question. Well, once one is admitted, and of course the patient would talk about what the symptoms are, we could detect fentanyl in the blood test and or the urine test. And just to remind the viewers, fentanyl is considered a synthetic opioid, which is basically 100 times the potency of heroin. So believe it or not, one little pinch, one little dash would be enough to kill an adult. And yet, thankfully, Miss Pino, Tatiana Pino, is alive.
It was a slow motion murder designed to look like natural illness. A cruel game of cat and mouse where Sergio held all the cards. Tatiana, unaware of what was happening to her, began experiencing a cascade of terrifying symptoms: nausea, dizziness, fainting spells, unexplained weight loss. Her body was under siege. Doctors were baffled. Despite numerous hospital visits, no one could figure out what was wrong. Tatiana was in and out of hospitals, her health deteriorating rapidly, but the true cause of her illness remained hidden. Even the best medical professionals at places like the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic were stumped. Tatiana was living in a nightmare, her body betraying her, while the doctors could only offer guesses. Was it some kind of rare disease? An autoimmune disorder? Cancer? No one really knew. And Sergio, watching her suffer from afar, just continued his campaign of terror. For a brief moment in late 2019, though, it seemed as if Tatiana was getting a little better. Her symptoms had subsided, and she began to look and feel like her old self again. And that's when she attended a Friendsgiving potluck, an evening that would soon turn from celebration to chaos. Tatiana walked into the party looking vibrant, healthy even. For a moment, it seemed the worst was behind her. But as the night progressed, things took a horrifying turn. Tatiana had brought a dish of Brussels sprouts to share. But after consuming the dish, multiple women became violently ill. Ambulances rushed to the scene, and the festive night quickly turned into pure chaos. The culprit? The Brussels sprouts. Though it was never officially identified as the source of the illness, it became clear that only those who consumed the Brussels sprouts became ill, and those who consumed them in larger quantities had to be hospitalized. But the truth behind the whole fiasco was far darker. Many suspected that Sergio had tampered with the food. His attempt to poison Tatiana had kind of backfired, and it became obvious to many that he was willing to risk the lives of an entire room full of women just to get rid of Tatiana. His desperation really knew no bounds. After that incident, Tatiana started feeling ill again. The effects of the poisoning started again, and this time they were taking an even heavier toll on her. And by early 2022, her health had reached a critical point, and she was having actual near-death experiences on an almost daily basis. She had to be resuscitated 35 times. Then one night in February 2022, things took a really terrifying turn. That night, Tatiana's daughter, Alessandra, found her mother unconscious on the floor, her skin turning purple, foam coming from her mouth. a telltale sign of severe poisoning. The sight of her mother, unresponsive and in such a horrifying state, sent Alessandra into a panic. It was every child's worst nightmare, a scene that felt ripped right out of the pages of a horror novel. Alessandra, frantic with fear, called 911, and Tatiana was rushed to the hospital. It wasn't the first time this has happened, but it was by far the most frightening. Although Tatiana had been resuscitated before, this time it felt different. This time, it felt like she might not make it. It seems like no one had a definitive answer for what was happening to her. She was slipping away, and the poison was coursing through her veins, silently killing her from the inside out. Despite everything, doctors were still in the dark. Tatiana was misdiagnosed with epilepsy, a condition that seemed to explain some of her symptoms, but not the whole picture. Over time, the poison had wreaked such havoc on her body that she needed a pacemaker to keep her heart functioning. This drastic measure shows just how severe her symptoms became. Meanwhile, Sergio's grip tightened. Sergio's control over her life had become so complete that her very survival now depended on machines. But Tatiana wasn't ready to give up. Her resilience, her will to live, and her unwavering faith kept her fighting. Tatiana's condition had worsened to the point that she sought the help at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. This at the insistence of her best friend and her sister, both who accompanied her. It was there that doctors finally uncovered the truth. Fentanyl, an opioid far stronger than morphine, had been found in her system. The revelation was shocking. It confirmed her worst fears. Tatiana had been poisoned all along. To better understand the severity of this kind of poisoning, I spoke with a toxicologist who specializes in these kind of poisonings and long-term exposure to toxins. Thank you, doctor, for joining me. Dr. Tatiana Pino was systematically poisoned with arsenic, with bath salts, cyanide, and fentanyl. What are the chances of surviving such a combination over time?
The chances are incredibly slim. Each of these poisons is deadly on its own, and combining them is highly unpredictable and dangerous. Arsenic leads to organ failure, cyanide prevents cells from using oxygen, bath salts cause extreme psychiatric and cardiovascular issues, and fentanyl can cause respiratory failure. Surviving this over time is almost unheard of.
And how could her body endure that?
It's likely the poisoning wasn't consistent, giving her body time to recover between doses. Medical interventions, even without knowing the full cause, could have mitigated some damage. Also, Tatiana must have had remarkable resilience to survive such extreme conditions.
It's really incredible that she kept going despite the severity of the poisons.
Absolutely. Most people wouldn't survive, even with medical help. So removing herself from the source was critical to her survival.
As the doctor explained, surviving a systematic poisoning of this magnitude is rare, almost unheard of. Tatiana Pino's resilience in the face of such calculated violence was nothing short of extraordinary. But even after the fentanyl was discovered, Sergio wasn't finished. His desperation only grew more, and his next steps would take an even darker turn. With the fentanyl discovery, Tatiana knew she had to act. She contacted the DEA. She moved out of the home she shared with Sergio and took refuge with her sister Maria. For 6 months, she stayed there. Her symptoms almost gone. She slowly regained her strength. But the danger wasn't over. Far from it. In April 2022, Tatiana filed for divorce, seeking to break free from the man who had been slowly destroying her life. But again, Sergio wasn't ready to let go. After the divorce filing, Sergio's behavior only escalated. The first sign of danger came in July 2022. Surveillance cameras at her sister Aurora's house captured footage of a hooded figure setting fire to not one, but both her vehicles. Aurora believed without a doubt that Sergio was behind it, and it turns out she was right. Sergio's violent acts didn't end with the fire. A year later, in August 2023, a truck deliberately rammed into Tatiana's car right outside her new Pinecrest home. And this was no accident. Sergio's desperation was turning deadly. Despite the FBI's growing interest in his activities, Sergio continued to plot. By September 2023, it was revealed that Sergio had staged attacks on himself, going as far as setting fire to his own car and fabricating a shooting at his home in Coco Plum, shattering the windows for good measure. But his ultimate goal remained the same: eliminate Tatiana, no matter the cost. But even after all of this, Sergio wasn't done. He had poisoned his wife, tried to intimidate her into settling her divorce, made her life a living nightmare. But it wasn't enough for him. By early 2024, his desperation had reached a fever pitch. His attempts to kill Tatiana through poison had failed. She had somehow survived. But now he wanted to make sure there were no more failures. This time, he wouldn't rely on slow-acting poisons or indirect methods. He was going to hire professionals, people who knew how to kill efficiently. He wanted to make sure Tatiana's death was inevitable. That's when Sergio turned to Fausto Villar, a man who had worked on his roof years earlier. Fausto wasn't just any roofer. He had a dark history, one filled with armed robbery and criminal connections. Sergio knew he could count on someone like Fausto to bring together a crew of ruthless men who wouldn't hesitate to pull the trigger. Fausto, who had been more than willing to help Sergio in exchange for a hefty payment, got to work assembling the murder crew. The promise of a better life? Just at his fingertips. The indictment also includes a new development. It states that Sergio handed Fausto a syringe with a clear liquid that was to be injected into Tatiana. Thankfully, the crew never got close enough to her to do it. It didn't take long for Fausto to find his men. He knew exactly where to look. One of his old prison acquaintances, Avery Bivens, was the first to join the crew. Bivens, who had done time for a slew of violent crimes, was a hardened criminal, someone who had already shown a willingness to do whatever it took for money. Avery, in turn, recruited several others to round out the group. They included men like Clementa Johnson, who was known for his ability to disappear after a crime, and Vernon Green, a man with a reputation for being unpredictable and highly dangerous. Their mission was clear: stalk Tatiana, learn her routines, and make her death look like a heart attack. Sergio didn't want any suspicions lingering. This had to look natural. He knew that if she simply disappeared or died in a suspicious way, people would point the finger at him. He was, after all, under investigation already, and the FBI had been circling him for months. If Tatiana died too conveniently, it would set off alarm bells. A heart attack, though, that would look like a tragic but plausible event. No one would think twice. And so the crew got to work. They began tracking Tatiana's movements, following her everywhere she went. They watched her house, her church, even her sister's home, where she had taken refuge. They knew when she left. They knew when she returned. They knew how long she was gone. The crew monitored her so closely that they could anticipate her next move almost before she made it. Then in June 2024, the crew decided it was time to act. Tatiana had returned from a worship service at Calvary Chapel, Miami, when they made their move. Vernon Green, dressed in shorts, a t-shirt, yellow boots, and a beanie, and a face mask, armed himself with a pistol and waited for the right moment. And as Tatiana pulled into her driveway, Green darted towards her vehicle. He had one goal: end her life. Tatiana, however, she wasn't someone who would go down easily. As she saw Green approaching, she honked her horn feverishly, hoping to draw attention. Then she sped towards the backyard, her car scraping against a tree and a fence as she tried to escape. Green, not expecting her to react so quickly, ran after her, but she managed to flee before he could get a shot. Furious, Green bolted towards the front door of the house, where Tatiana's 26-year-old daughter, Alessandra, had just stepped outside. Alessandra came face to face with a man holding a gun. Green, standing just inches away from her, pointed the weapon directly at her head. and demanded that she go back inside the house. Terrified, Alessandra complied, but she had the presence of mind to call 911.
There's a guy with a gun, please.
You mean there's a guy with a gun?
Yes, he just pointed a gun at me, and they're still here.
That's Alessandra Pino, daughter of Tatiana and Sergio, whose high-stakes divorce ended in what the FBI calls a murder-for-hire plot.
Is there anyone else there with you?
No, I need to tell my mom not to come home. I think they might be looking for her.
They were, but she didn't realize Tatiana had already pulled her car into the back of the house as a gunman approached to finish what the FBI alleges was to be a $300,000 contract on Tatiana's life.
My mom is here. They might have shot her.
Okay, did you see what he was wearing?
No, he just had a mask on.
But the man who held a pistol inches from Alessandra's face never got a shot off. Vernon Green, the FBI has alleged, still on probation after serving a 27-year sentence for armed robbery and attempted murder.
The police were on their way, but by the time they arrived, the crew had disappeared, leaving nothing but fear and chaos in their wake. The next day, June 24th, 2024, the FBI raided Sergio Pino's mansion in Coco Plum. They had long suspected he was involved in something dark, but now they had more concrete evidence to link him to the plot. His phones, his computers, and other devices were confiscated. The FBI found messages and WhatsApp calls between Sergio and Fausto Villar, messages that detailed his attempts to hire hitmen and stage his wife's death. Sergio had grown so bold that he hadn't even tried to cover his tracks. His arrogance was just outstanding and foolish. But as investigators began piecing together the case, they realized that this wasn't the first attempt on Tatiana's life. In fact, this crew was the second group of hitmen Sergio had hired. The first crew, which had been assembled months earlier, had also failed to carry out the job. The first crew's failure came from a series of missteps. Their surveillance of Tatiana had been sloppy, and they had missed key opportunities to take her out when she was the most vulnerable. Sergio was growing impatient, so he fired them and turned to Fausto for help. But even with Fausto's more experienced team, the plan had fallen apart. After the FBI raid, the murder crew disbanded, but not before they had left a trail of evidence behind. They had been so close to succeeding, and yet Tatiana had survived once again. Each failed attempt only seemed to fuel Sergio's desire for control. But this time, the net was closing in on him. The FBI was relentless, and with every new piece of evidence they gathered, Sergio's empire of lies began to crumble. Even though the FBI had thwarted the murder attempt, if in fact it was a murder attempt, it was clear to them that Sergio's grip on reality was loosening. He had grown so desperate that he staged attacks on himself. After investigators uncovered that in September 2023, Sergio had orchestrated the burning of his own car, a shooting at his home, and made false statements to law enforcement in an attempt to create a smokescreen, they realized that he just wanted people to think that he was the victim, that he was the one being targeted. It was a twisted move, meant to throw off anyone who suspected him. Sergio's plans didn't stop there, though. He had already been plotting for years, long before the murder cruise. Sergio had made it his job to intimidate Tatiana into settling their divorce. There were the letters and the phone calls, and when those failed, he turned to more violent methods: arson, staged robberies, and eventually poisoning. Tatiana, meanwhile, had been living in constant fear. Even after moving in with her sister, Maria, she knew Sergio was always watching her. She had witnessed firsthand the lengths he was willing to go to destroy her. This really wasn't just about a failed marriage anymore. Sergio was consumed by the need to win at all costs, even if it meant burning down the lives of those around him. And then there was the Home Depot truck incident in August 2023. Tatiana had just moved into a new home in Pinecrest. She was hoping for a fresh start. But Sergio had other plans. A truck, deliberately driven by one of Sergio's associates, rammed into her vehicle, an event that was captured on surveillance footage. This footage is still available online and really worth watching. It's a chilling reminder that no matter where she went, Sergio would always find a way to come after her. But it is also a testament to her strength and resilience, and her refusal to be his victim. The poisoning, the arson, the staged attacks, it was all leading up to this moment. But as Sergio's empire began to crumble, so too did his control. The cracks in the foundation of his carefully constructed life had finally started to show. As Sergio's web of violence and deceit began to unravel, the world could finally see him for who he really was. Not the successful businessman or the admired developer, but a man whose thirst for control had driven him to unimaginable lengths. Next time, on Cracks in the Foundation, we'll dive even deeper into Sergio Pino. Before his reign of terror on Tatiana, some close to him now say that the much-admired Cuban developer with the rags to riches story had little integrity and few rules when it came to business as well, claiming that he would do anything to get his way. Could we then have seen all this coming? Stay tuned. This has been Dial M for Miami. Be sure to subscribe and follow for the next episode of Cracks in the Foundation, the Sergio Pino story. Thank you for joining me. I'm Ana Quincoses. I'd like my audience to be aware that the content of this podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any organizations or individuals referenced. All individuals mentioned in this podcast are considered innocent until proven guilty. While we make every effort to ensure the accuracy of the information presented, we cannot guarantee that all details are accurate or up to date. Any errors or omissions are unintentional. This podcast does not intend to defame or harm the reputation of any individual, and any statements made should be interpreted in the context of public commentary and storytelling.